Well, welcome everybody to Fleet's Random Ramblings. Those of you watching on the channel, and those of you watching in the Discord server, which is currently exactly no one. Which is odd. Like, this is bizarre. Having no one around for ramblings is just weird. That's not normal. One person's shown up. Huzzah. Well, do you think the show's losing popularity? Maybe. Maybe the show is losing popularity. Good evening, Sulfur. Maybe last week was so good everyone just decided that was the last one. You know, you can't make this stuff up. Oh. I mean, I hope not. If there's only 3 people, this is going to be a really short ramblings. Like let's see, how many people have the ramblings ping? Let's have a look. So when the ramblings roll goes out, 362 people get the ping. Like, surely at least a good number of those you would expect, like a good 10 to appear. I'm not even in double digits at this point. At least C Dollars is here. That's something, I suppose. Old reliable C Dodders. Damn. 4 people. Well, you all 5. I thank God that's my co-host showing up. Thank God I don't have to do this alone. I can't do it alone. I tell you. Oops, sorry. Try that again, chair. There we go. Well, you all know the drill. For those of you who are new here, we do get 1 or 2 new people coming in every now and then. Welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings, the show, podcast, streaming service, where I answer the questions asked by the kind people in the Discord server, and, for the last few months, the people on YouTube, though there are rarely ever YouTube questions, which is a shame. But oh well. You all know the drill, so please, as long as it doesn't break the rules of the server, feel free to ask away. Always happy to have questions. I wonder. Any questions? Any questions at all? Come on, don't be shy, I don't bite.
He does.
No, I don't. Let me see. Finished my French battle carrier. It's definitely that's all made out of cardboard, scratch built. That's fairly impressive. Kind of a follow-up from last week with the Belfast and the Battle of the Nile, Brackman asks. How would the rest of the world react to such a thing? Well, there'll be confusion, outrage, some swearing, and then lots of questions. Sulfur asks, 2 cylinders, Gresley conjugated, 3 or 4 cylinders on locomotives. 9 times out of 10, you want 2-cylinder machines. You want 2-cylinder machines with external valve gear, 9 times out of 10. Basically, because anything else is just adding complexity and maintenance, and you're having to ask engineers to climb into sharp places.
Yeah.
It just, yeah. Like, you only really want that if you're trying to squeeze more power out of a machine. Usually for heavy freight engines, you get more power by just making the loco bigger. It's only for things like express engines where you're looking for speed, or for power at speed, and therefore with a steam engine you need massive amounts of efficiency, that you're looking to use the steam more than once.
Yeah.
When you start getting things like, caption this, Naval Ops Warship Gunner 2, the game I've always wanted to play but never had the chance to. I played the original, but never had the chance to.
Bamcan.
Nothing wrong with a good Bullied Pacific, I tell you.
Nothing wrong with a Bullied Pacific. Love me a Bullied Pacific.
Are we bullying the Bullied Pacific?
No. Bullied should not be bullied.
I hate you sometimes.
No, terrible idea. Don't put steam turbines on locomotives.
Yeah, we learned.
You can't get the gearing.
No,
The gears don't work.
Yeah,
So-
this lesson was learnt by multiple different railway companies independently over the course of 50 years.
There's a reason they rebuilt the turbo motive to just be a standard.
Because it was fine, but the improvement wasn't enough to make the complexity worth it. In fact, the thing that the turbo motive did was that it worked fine, but that's all it did. It didn't bring any improvements in efficiency, operating speed, power down on the track. Like, so there was no point to it. Okay, there we go. Advertisement spread through Rex's and Monroe's server. Now, the GT3 gas turbine was a massive misstep by General Electric. Sorry, not General Electric. What was it?
English Electric?
That's it. Yeah, that was a massive misstep. Not in the idea of the locomotive. What they built was a very successful one of the most successful gas turbines to run in service anywhere, and I include the UP gas turbines in that. The problem is they went with a archaic layout for the machine. It should have been, like, if you need the big driving wheels transfer power, that's fine. But what it should have been is it should have been a 6-axle machine with connecting rods if you want it, but double-ended, with the fuel be put either side of the turbine, with cabs at either end, and no tender.
Just a bit odd, innit?
Why they chose to build it as a steam outline machine, I'll never know. It's just very silly. We don't talk about Bully's chain drive. We don't talk about it.
It's just weird.
Never happened.
I don't get it. Why?
At point blank range, can CSS Virginia hope to do damage against a World War II battleship? I'll be generous and call IGN Congo about. CSS Virginia's cannons can't even penetrate the sides of some cruisers. It's a solid iron round shot. It's not going to penetrate something that's designed to resist 5-inch shell fire.
Didn't you guys see the Battle of Hampton Roads? Like,
They said they couldn't penetrate each other at point blank bloody range.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, the whole thing. Well, they didn't do any damage to each other. What do you think they're going to do against steel? Let alone, properly cemented steel armor. Like, it's not.
What was the best cruiser design in World War II and the best atomic submarine in the Cold War? Well, best cruiser design in World War II, I'm sorry, but there is literally no contest because the fucking Des Moines exist. I'm sorry, but a cruiser that has a rate of fire that at a 5-inch destroyer gun of the period is not going to match, plus is armoured not just against its own guns, but guns larger than the ones it carries, plus can do plus 30 knots, and has a fully working anti-aircraft system that will shoot down any strike package that would probably be tasked to kill it. And because of their power, stayed in service for 30 years in frontline service, Yeah, no, there's no context. And again, for atomic submarines in the Cold War, you, it's again the problem with making the net that vast is that it's really easy and obvious who's going to win it. And if we're talking Cold War, then I'm sorry, but Los Angeles, the latest, whatever the last mark of Los Angeles was that entered service before the Cold War period ended, like. what about the Akulas? What about the Akulas? Come on. Come back to it. Come back to when I start taking Trafalgar's. No, I'm sorry. The Los Angeles is just better in the Cold War period. What would be the best cruiser at the beginning of the Second World War? Well. Now that's more interesting. There's a few options we can go for. It basically depends on what you want, in essence. All-rounder, you're looking at a tie between Algerie and the counties for an all-round balance between armor speed and firepower. For raw Dakar downrange, you're looking at a a Brooklyn or one of the... Yeah, basically a Brooklyn. For general purpose fleet scouting work, you're looking at... Oh no, the Tones not in service at 1939, so they can't be counted. But yeah, basically it's either... If we're talking about all-round cruisers, we're talking about Algerie or the counties once they've been belted up with the fitted fore but not with belt.
And I see someone mention Graf Spee. Like, didn't you see what Exeter, Ajax, and Achilles did?
No, Mutsu, both those suggestions are wrong. The Atagos are small diminutive cruisers, and Graf Spee is and the Deutschlands are hilariously overbuilt designs that, well, look, I've already detailed 1,000 times.
They got beaten up by just the three cruisers that they had on hand to deal with it. Like, Graf Spee. That circles back to whoever said which battleship sank itself. Graf Spee, sort of, if you can as a battleship.
Well, the Akulas are post Cold War designs, and while they are effective boats, it took them a few generations to effectively come into their operable capability. Like it took 3 variations of Akula to get to the point that they were functional boats. Chris asked, did the engine room crews of ships know they could be turned into steam lobsters if any of the machinery spaces got hit? No, because that's not how boiler explosions steam leaks work. It's hard to overstate quite how rapidly steam cools once it leaves a enclosed space. Look at cylinder cocks, for example, on steam locomotives. Ever see a steam locomotive pulling out of a station with its cylinder cocks open, billowing steam and water vapor out of its cylinders? No one gets hurt or scolded by it. Admittedly, in a high-pressure boiler room, you'd have slightly higher temperatures of steam, but again, if the boiler is breached catastrophically, you're not going to have long enough to be... Well, you'll either be horribly burned by it but live and heal, or you'll die from the original explosive decompression of the boiler. It won't be steamed lobster effect, as you so eloquently put it.
Well, they know they're working with high pressure steam, so they know the dangers that come along with that.
But it's all...
You blow up your own boilers, which wouldn't be a very good idea.
Yeah, but it's also mature technology by this point, so they're not worried about it going wrong in any way that's going to cause them to...
Unless they horrifically mismanage it.
But again, mature technology, people operating it should know what they're doing. Marshall Rune asked, it probably didn't happen in any capacity for a reason, but we had steam planes. The Besla steam plane being a notable example. Yes. Was there any way to make these things feasible for World War II? Yeah, just continue to develop the technology. The Besla steam engine had potential. It ran in... It's basically the steam engine, but internal combustion engine, in essence. It runs on light fuel oil, starts quickly, burns light fuel oil controlled by the throttle, so instead of actually controlling the rate at which steam passes into the steam engine by controlling the rate at which basically, instead of having to both manage steam generation and the rate at which steam throws into the cylinders, you just manage steam generation, and the throttle controls the amount of oil fed to the fire. Basically, like a car, but instead of going straight petrol into combustion chamber, it's light fuel oil into firebox, then more steam into cylinder. There's no reason why you couldn't develop Besla engines to a point where you'd have equivalent horsepower outputs for weight that you would have in equivalent internal combustion engines. Chris asks, caption this, and he shows a cursed image of a Fuso.
Which appears to have one of the 12-inch mounts in the
14-inch, don't forget.
14, sorry. Gotcha.
Another joke at the expense of the Fuso's pagoda-style towers, which are a very ingenious Japanese solution to the problem of fire control. Which, I'm really sick of the fucking jokes at this point.
Wouldn't it be beneficial to put one of the 14s all the way up there?
No.
That extra
I'm gonna yeet you off.
You know, just get a nice
Cevix asks again, what about the best destroyers for the outbreak of World War II? Which class was the best in your opinion? Before the outbreak of World War II? That's basically the tribals. Without... If you're talking... Well... It's arguable it's the tribals, it's arguable it's whatever destroyer the Americans are building, because the Fletchers aren't quite there yet. I think. Let me just check. It's either the Fletchers or the tribals. Yeah, no, the Fletchers aren't around. They aren't around until 3rd of March 41. So it is basically the tribals, because they're just arguably better than anything else. Yeah, there was a possibility of modernizing the Swordfish. It was called the Albacore, and it was worse.
Yeah.
And they still built it anyway because there was nothing else.
Yeah. Like, one thing to remember, the Swordfish is an outdated design, sort of.
Not really. No, it's not. Well, it is by 1941. It is by 1941, but it's equivalent.
Yeah, by 41. But a reminder that it was first introduced in 36. Like, these are not old airframes. It's just old concepts. So you can't really modernize a thing that's currently roughly in date. Like,
yeah, well, no, the Swordfish is not so obsolete it became good. It's just that the Swordfish's operating environment was uniquely the North Atlantic, where it was going to encounter German raiders by themselves or small German flotillas, which wouldn't put enough flak up to have a serious risk of downing the strike packages of the size that the Swordfish was operating. You see that when a German fleet of actual size appears, e.g. the Channel Dash Force, which was the largest concentration of German warships that went to sea during as a single flotilla during the Second World War, you'll see that the Swordfish get utterly annihilated by the Channel Dash flak umbrella. And in the Mediterranean as well. The Swordfish have less success in the Mediterranean, where they're attacking Italian vessels. Because, again, proper flak umbrella. But where they are actually operating What if the Spitfire was an RN project and not an RAF one? Then there wouldn't be a Spitfire. Because the Spitfire comes out of an RAF requirement. The Royal Navy at the time the Spitfire is being designed has entirely different requirements for aircraft. Massively so. It's not even funny. It's what leads to things like the Rock and the Skewer. You basically just wouldn't get the Spitfire, you'd get the Rock or the Skewer. No, yeah, Mutsu, that's just the Type 45 in heavy seas.
It's submarine. It's surrounded by water. Periscope depth.
Funny. Let's see if there's anyone. Oh, no one's watching on the internet, sadly, but oh well. Would we get the Rolls-Royce Griffin for Spitfire? If it was an RN project, like I said, no, because the Spitfire wouldn't exist. Because at the time the Spitfire is being designed, the RN's looking at things like Skewer and Rock for its needs. So you'll just get Skewer and Rock, and the Hurricane will become the mainline fighter aircraft of the Royal Air Force. Well, yes, I know the Rolls-Royce Griffin was an RM project, but there's not going to be a Spitfire to put it on. This is the point. Oh, excuse me. Bit of the old where did I put it? Ah, yes, here it is. I knew I'd put it somewhere. Ah, brilliant. You know, I'm not even going to question that. That is a car. That is several car bodies put together, mounted on railway chassis to form some sort of makeshift rail car.
But then there's like a giant pile of sleepers or something in the middle of the track.
I assume that's one end of whatever line this is. Yes, there was many attempts at unifying RN and RAF planes during the period, because in the interwar period, the Fleet Air Arm didn't exist. It was just RAF squadrons on Royal Navy vessels. And they tried very hard to unify what the RAF was using with what the Fleet Air Arm was using. Luckily, the Fleet Air Arm got control back in the years leading up to the Second World War. Thank God for that. Have I heard of the Type 55 and Type 52Ds? No. I have not heard of those ships.
But either the new Chinese things.
In that case, I have no bloody clue.
Type 55, built 2014 to present, in service 2020.
Yeah, it's new Chinese MacGuffin. We have no idea what it is. We have no idea what its exact capabilities are.
It's a stealth destroyer.
No conjecture I can make on it will be accurate.
It's got VLS. It's got a deck gun. It's got a helipad.
Sulphur asks, not sure if you can explain this, but why did intermodal freight appear only when it did? Basically, it's down to a move away from wagon load or less than wagon load freight, and it's also seeing a rise in shipment of in more than wagon load shipments from manufacturers to customers, and basically a desire to move those shipments across multiple different avenues of movement without needing to constantly load and unload the cargo. It was basically the increased speed of doing business or the desire to increase the speed of doing business and the speed of transit that led to the containerization movement in the 60s and 70s. At least that's what I expect.
You can look at intermodal freight back to the 20s, because that's when you've got like the specially designed little container things that you can dump in the back of a 3-plank wagon or whatever, and also put on the back of a sort of some of the very early trucks. It's when, I mean, I'm just looking at the Wikipedia here, and it's saying that some people had already figured out ways of basically just having tubs of coal that you could take from a carriage or a cart or whatever, and just dump the tub straight into the back of a barge. So I mean, that's intermodal transport in the 18th century stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, Brunel had iron containers to move coal from the Vale of Neath to Swansea.
Right. Cvix asks, I assume were NATO submarines better than Soviet ones? I mean, especially kilos. And he clarifies, saying, in terms of speed, stealth, maybe overall. A diesel sub is a diesel sub is a diesel sub. It depends on what era of the Cold War you're in, but assuming just prior to the end of it, the kilos were, and arguably are, some of the most effective diesel boats ever created. The West has matched and exceeded them, as we always will and always do. But when they were completed, in the later stages of the Cold War, the Western diesel boats currently in service were usually the last tranche of 60s and 70s designs, and so were at that point thoroughly outclassed. Of course, the fact that, well, it depends which navy, but basically they're all diesel boats, and they're all quiet, sneaky fuckers with torpedoes, so I don't know what to tell you, Chief. I genuinely, it's, when it comes to diesel boats, it's horses for coursers and nuts for nuts, basically. If I'm going to be completely brutally honest with you. Marshall Rune asks, in the Pacific Theatre, soldiers were frequently issued swords. The NRA, no idea who they are, got their Dao Dao, the Japanese got their katanas. This begged a question, how many melee 1v1s were recorded? I have absolutely no idea. No idea. Sulfur, thank you, Sulfur. I have no idea. Yes, Sea Dollars, those exist, but they're not containerization. Not strictly, anyway.
The second one sort of is.
A little, but it's not. It's not slot and lock containerism.
No.
Yeah, the mini containers. Yeah, maybe, it depends. But pure containerization as we know it properly took ages to appear. A much longer time than you'd expect. Well, just waiting for more questions now. I'm just also... It's weird. No one comes to the YouTube side of it. Shame. Maybe one of these days I'll get a ramblings that'll blow up and I'll be swamped with 25 billion different questions. Yeah, that's yeah. Well, I assume there would have been. It's a major war. I would assume there would be um an American soldier punching out a Japanese idiot with a sword makes sense. Modular warships, novelty, genius, or impractical. Depends on the era, depends on the time. Even right now, modular warships are still a little bit far in the future. We can't just pull and pick.
But
it's
construction-wise,
yeah,
it's very
yeah,
useful.
yeah. For constructing them, it's great, but you're not swapping modules in and out.
Yeah, swapping modules and is different things. But like, if you can, I mean, like when you're building for different navies, like, oh, can we have this, this, and this in our new ship, please? Thank you.
Ghost.
Like, oh yeah, we have the plans for that and that.
Petch, Duke of Edgington asks, what if the Aussies got a license to produce Crusader cruiser tanks? It's not that the Australians couldn't get a license to build the bloody things. It's that the Australians realised that cruiser tanks were really not what the Australian army needed. They weren't going to send those tanks over to Western Europe to fight in Europe because they could then get tanks from the British when they're there. What Australia needed was a reliable, easy to construct and maintain tank, and what the British were currently building, while some of the tanks fit some of the builds they wanted, they didn't have the right mix of armor, speed, and firepower they wanted. In the Australian cruiser tanks, you see tanks that don't really fit the proper cruiser designation, built around a much easier to maintain suspension system, cast using whatever materials cast using Australian steel mills, and armed with whatever guns the Australians can lay their hands on. Cvix asks, maybe another Cold War question, because I have met with a statement that Soviet submariners were better trained than NATO, especially the Americans, and better than Soviet service forces. Is this just true, or is this a biased statement? It is like most statements made by the Soviets in the Cold War. Biased. Don't believe anything that comes out of Soviet Russia, because most of it was lies.
There's no denying that they're probably reasonably well trained, because they have a little bit, nuclear reactors in a submarine. It's not the best. Like they would have been well trained, better than NATO. Yeah, probably not. And I mean, ultimately, their equipment is worse in several situations. Because
basically,
oh boy, are Soviet subs noisy little things.
Yes, just a tad.
In comparison to like, a Los Angeles or a Trafalgar or something like that, those things are rattling their way along. Grief.
To be fair, the Crusader isn't a bad tank considering the Japanese, I think you mean, Peshington. Not Japs. Japanese. The Crusader, it's not that the Crusader isn't a bad tank. It's a racial slur, Cindy. I thought you, of all people, would understand that. I thought you were up with that sort of thing. The Japanese is a racial... The Jap is a racial slur. I thought we were all up with that. I don't know. I think it's something to do with context, I guess. Look, I don't make the rules. I just follow them, alright? It is, but it's not used the same way that Brit is. Brit is more a shortening of British and is usually a term of neutral or endearment, whereas Jap is usually a term of derogatory, or is usually used in a derogatory manner. Those Japs, those Japanese, those... Yeah, it's not...
Anyway.
Yeah, because Krauts, again, Krauts could be derogatory, but it could also be neutral, so it's not viewed quite the same way. But Jap was basically always used in a derogatory manner, usually to put down the Japanese every time it's used. For example, as Spiteful Ghost used it, the Crusader is a bad tank, considering the Japs had literal trash armor. He's literally putting them down and using it to emphasize his point that their armor was shit. Again. Anyway, brief history on history lesson on racial stereotypes and profiling and the way language shapes the way we think aside. There you are, folks. See? I'm socially conscious. Aside. Yes, I know that you didn't mean it, but other people might not see it that way. It's...
Anyway. Where were we?
Crusader. So yeah, it's not that the Crusader was a bad tank. It's that it wasn't a fit for what the Japanese needed. They needed something that was relatively cheap, could be built by themselves. Basically, they needed all the they needed the tooling to be. Yeah, again, Aussie is. I've already detailed why there is a different connotation to it. I'm not going to go over it again. But yeah, the Australians needed a different... They needed a tank they could build themselves. And by that I mean from the ground up. No imported tooling, no imported jigs. The only thing that was imported on it were imported, even then, not even really, were the guns. And even then, Australia had a limited ability to produce 2-pounders. Of course you can, Sidious. Go right ahead. Had World War II not happened, how long do you think it would take missiles to replace big guns? I literally covered this last week. I literally covered this last week. We literally had a question about how long it would take the battleship to die if World War II hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Don't worry, the live stream, the VOD is still up. It's there to go have a look at. It's fine. And besides, last week was last week was the best ramblings we had for a while. It was a Drac ramblings. Basically because the audience asked for it. Darth Sidious asks, if HMAS Australia had been retained after the Washington Naval Treaty, so assuming Australia decides to have its own part in the treaty, you think she would have served through World War II? And if yes, how would, if at all, it look after her refit? No, she's not serving to World War II. The Australians will have an option for replacement, probably an option for early replacement, and they will probably take that in the 30s. Basically, Australia will be the new build capital ship to replace Australia will be the ship that... the first ship probably built in British yards. Although the Australians will have less tonnage, she'll probably be, the Australians will get probably... I don't know what... Yeah, they probably won't get a full 35,000 ton allowance for a capital ship, they'll probably say, look, we can get by on 25,000 tons. So you're looking at a ship armed with 8 to 9 12-inch guns, definitely a battle cruiser or something like it, armored against its own guns, capable of about 32 knots, 6-inch secondary battery and 4-inch anti-aircraft battery, laid down probably late 20s, early 30s, probably when Australia can find the budget. She might even be even smaller than that. She might even be a ship of 20,000 tons armed with 6 12-inch guns in 3 twins. Again, it's hard to say exactly what the Australian government would go for and exactly what the treaty restrictions on Australian capital ship construction would be. She may not be replaced by a capital ship at all. The Austrians may go for a light carrier. Hard to say. No, that's way too big, Pedgington. That's way too big, and it's way outside of Australia's budget. That they don't have the funds to reach for that. They've got a 12-inch armored battle cruiser of about... You see. They've got a battle cruiser of about 22,000 tons. So they're going to go with something... They're going to go... Yes, post-World War I, but that was pre-treaty. We're talking post-treaty. Which is, at this point, the Australians are now looking for a ship of about 20,000 tons to replace Australia with another Australia. So you're looking... Yeah, you're basically looking at a ship with either 8 or 6. There is a difference between the Renowns. Yeah, I get the Renowns aren't that heavy, or at least you think so. No, yeah, the Renowns in terms of I'm going off full load displacement here. At deep load, the Renowns are 32,000 tons. That's 10,000 tons heavier than the Indefatigables are, than Australia is. It's basically you're buying another treaty cruiser's worth of ship. That's gonna stretch the price point. I mean, they could do that, Bull Rees, but that would be the expensive option. I'd say you're looking at a 20,000 ton ship with 6 12-inch. Probably only armoured against 8-inch shellfire, but across its entire belt length. Probably capable of anywhere between 30 to 32 knots. Because she'll be built in the late 20s, early 30s, she'll just miss the dual-purpose battery revolution. So she'll have a mixed 6-inch and 4-inch secondary and AA battery. Although she may get a refit to a 4.5-inch or just full 4-inch secondary battery before... No, she probably... If she survives the... No, not the 4-inch triples, just 4-inch singles or twins. Because these are just AA mounts, they're not the secondaries. The secondaries will be 6-inch twins. Similar to, but more advanced versions of Nelson's 6-inch twins. Maybe that we're giving them a lion after modernization. Yeah, the problem is that that's specifically what Britain's supposed to not do. That is expressly forbidden under the Washington Naval Treaty. Britain is not allowed to refit ships and give them to their dominions. That is there's literally a clause in the treaty for that exact purpose. If Australia wants a ship, they have to pay for it themselves, buy it themselves. They can't just get given a hand-me-down. Even the Dunkirks are too big, Bull Reeves. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, Pedgington. I'm talking about a 1930s era design. If it's been built in 1930, it'll have six 12-inch guns in 3 twins, speed of about 30 knots, armoured either to resist its own guns with an all-or-nothing scheme, or have a full protective length against 8 or presumably 8.5 whatever shellfire. It'll have a secondary battery of probably 12 6-inch in 3 twin turrets per side, and 8 to 10 4-inch in singles that'll probably be upgraded, so that some will probably be upgraded to twins later on. If H-45 was ever built, presuming that the war goes on or finishes, and Germany somehow finds the money, and somehow hollows out a fucking fjord to serve as the dry dock for this thing, because H-45 is just, by the way, a ludicrous ship that is just silly. It is silly beyond... It's not even fucking H-44. It's just silly. H-44 was the ship with... what I can describe as 20-inch guns. H-45 was supposed to be a ship armed with Schwerer Gustav guns in its turrets.
It's stupid.
Yeah. So...
Stupid. Like, you don't... You are firing how many rounds in the action? You are asking to be tall-boyed to death.
Yeah, assuming...
Like, it would be impossible to miss it with a Grand Slam.
Like, assuming that you somehow hold out a fjord to build it, you've basically created a ship that absorbs basically half the Kriegsmarine's capital ship crew to run, guzzles all the rest of the capital ship's fuel, requires every single ship in the Kriegsmarine's escort every time it sails because you'll be so afraid of losing it, has no interoperability with the other ships of the world, because, to put it bluntly, there are very few ports that can hold it. It can only operate from the port that actually it was built in.
Which is going to be some random Norwegian fjord.
And every time you sail it out, you're basically using it as a propaganda piece. And if, God forbid, the war's still going on, the first time it sails out, every Allied submarine, every Allied carrier, etc., will congregate in the area and will happily laugh as they utterly, completely annihilate this stupid...
You'll hear it on hydrophones in America, just from the bow wake of this thing. Like... Stupid.
It is incredibly stupid.
It'll just get Grand Slammed to death, because... funny. Yes, the Mark 14 could not miss this thing. It was so wide.
Okay, where are we?
Mark 14 will fail to detonate, and you'll have...
Civix asks, maybe we better give him the... Oh no, I already answered that one question. Civix says, in relation to the Australia question, what about a scaled down G3, 26,000 tons, 9 12-inch guns, around 30 knots, 4-inch secondaries? Again, that's a little bit too much foreknowledge put into it with the secondaries. Like, everything else is fine, but again, if you're building a capital ship prior to the mid-30s, you aren't at the all dual-purpose revolution yet. You are going to have a mixed secondary battery of 6-inch and 4-inch. But yeah, that's probably the most expensive thing Australia will be willing to go to. Oh, the new Soyuz! I love it! I love it! Again, this is more spoilers for what will be coming soon. But again, this is the newest refit of the Soyuz. What's changed? What have you changed?
What have you done, Sea Daughters? What have you done?
No, I'm more interested in what he's changed, because I recognise the ship. How could I not? It's the Red Fleet Timeline Sovetski Soyuz. After her 1959 to 62 rebuild, which turned her into a guided missile battleship. No, not in the real world. It didn't.
Yeah,
Well, no, it did, but it would have required a lot of additional expenditure to rebuild some of the lost capacity, specialist capacity. But the money was there if the Russians were willing to expend it. But realistically, as we know, the Russians were not willing to expend it to finish the Svetsky Soyuz.
Make it a hydrofoil $2.
Shush, you. Don't give...
Or a Necrano plan.
I have not seen Godzilla -1. I am tempted to, but broke. Oh, good lord. I hate the H-45. I hate the H-45. It never happened. I hate the H-45.
I wish the H-45 would happen so the war would end so much quicker because all of Germany's resources would just disappear trying to build the thing.
Yeah.
It's like Jagdtiger. It's like, yes, no, these were actually really good for the Allied war effort.
Okay, first of all, that image kind of goes hard. Second of all, the rest of it raises more questions than it answers. Marshall, what are Fleet's thoughts on rockets? That is an extremely vague question. Can you clarify and narrow it down a bit?
Congreve had the best one, none of them are better.
While we're waiting for No Name to narrow that down, Marshall Rune asks about World War II not happening. Which theatre, European or Pacific, was less likely to be prevented? Pacific. Because once the US decides that the Japanese need to stop and imposes the oil embargo, the Japanese are basically on the clock to declaration of war in December of 41. It's happening in December of 41 because that was basically the time when the Japanese felt they were ready enough as they were going to get, but also had enough fuel in their reserves to actually commit to the campaign to seize what they needed to seize.
Yeah, like
so
as soon as America decided that Japan was doing bad, like then
the war's going to happen.
The Japanese definitely aren't stopping, and the Americans aren't going to stop either.
No, because the whole point of the blockade was to make them stop. And if you think, oh, say, well, oh, that's not, they just won't go to war with America, then they'll just declare war on the Dutch Indies. Any attempt to get around the blockade or reduce its effects will result in the US going, oh, the blockade's not working. Right, off to war we go then.
Yeah, well, the whole reason they went to war, the whole reason they did the preemptive strike on Pearl Harbor was so that they would have the time to get the Dutch East Indies. Like, they knew if they went for the Dutch East Indies, the Americans would declare war on them. So they thought, well, why don't we knock out the Americans first, and then go after the Dutch East Indies?
Whilst Europe is preventable by a variety of different ways. Well, World War II...
35, the French go, actually, you can't remilitarize the Rhineland. Stop it.
38, the British and French go, actually, yeah, you want to take the Czechs? Please. Give it a crack. Come on, then. Or me, the French, the British, the Czechs, and the Poles against you. Go on, Germany, give it a crack, see what happens.
Come through the Sudetenland, please. We beg of you.
Darth Sidious says, for his next question, I need to be answered a question. Canada voted on if they should purchase a battlecruiser before World War I, right? No. They voted on if they should purchase a battlecruiser or a squadron of 3 flat-decked Queen Elizabeth-class battleships. Darth Sidious asks, when did the term battlecruiser enter German nomenclature? Never. Never. The Germans never ever called anything a battlecruiser. They were either large cruisers or large armoured cruisers.
Big boy.
They never called them battlecruisers. No Name says, I wanted to ask a more specific session about something that just happened, just making sure you have your opinions on the subject somewhere. Just quickly, anyways, thoughts on the stages for the last regular Vega launch being accidentally thrown out, crushed, and sent to a scrapyard? I don't know. I have no firm opinions one way or the other.
I'm not entirely sure what you're talking about.
Bull Reeves asks, I got access in another server and figured I'd forward it here. What's the most balanced design layout for a treaty battleship? Sorry, for a battleship. Allow me to present to you the artist formerly known as the Imperial Japanese Navy ship Yamato. I'm not fucking joking. Yamato is the most well-balanced battleship ever built. There's nothing that comes close. She's fast, well-armoured, and well-armed.
And she's just so big that it's quite difficult to tip over. So, center of balance is pretty good. The amount of flooding that those things took on before, they started tipping over. That's a stable, well-balanced ship.
Marshall Rune asks, you need to go back to the 20s and do something to stop the Pacific War. Well, that's really easy. I need to basically shoot the army and convince the Navy to help me shoot the army before they coup the Japanese civilian government. You basically need to somehow prevent... In order to stop the rise of militarism in Japan, you basically have to keep the clique in power which believes that tying Japan to one of the world's major powers is the best way to secure Japanese interests and win any major conflict that Japan might be involved in, which prior to the Washington Naval Treaty was tying Japan to the British Empire. Whereas the moment that alliance is dissolved, that clique, which is democratic and willing to work with other... I mean, they are somewhat warmongery, but they are willing to work with other nations and form agreements. Whereas the moment that clique loses its ability to say, we're tied to Great Britain, therefore Japan's interests are secured, we've captured some decent territorial gains, now we need to focus on industrializing our nation, working with the British to secure trade links, etc., etc. The moment that alliance goes away, the Japanese, basically, that clique loses all power, and the militarists go, the only way for Japan to be secure is to take what we need from those around us and damn what anyone else says to fucking stop us. So, to be blunt, you've somehow got to either preserve the Anglo-Japanese Naval Alliance secretly through the Washington Naval Treaty, or oddly enough, you need the Washington Naval Treaty to not happen. Which will probably lead to another war, but you said I had to stop the proper Pacific War. You didn't say anything about preventing the war in the 1920s. What are the most cursed ships? Ships that had a career that shouldn't be possible outside of fiction. Cursed instead of blessed. The fuck does flat deck Queen Elizabeth mean? I'm so glad you asked, actually. There was a design. For a Queen Elizabeth with all the turrets mounted on the deck. No super firing at all to save weight.
Oh.
I wondered if Sea Dollars were going to get to it before me, but no, I'm going to have to get to it myself. Let me just see if I can find an image for it. Where is it? I'm trying to find it. There used to be images of it all over the bloody... all over the bloody MacGuffin. Bloody hell! Christ, I'm having trouble finding it. Give me a second. Sod this. To shit bucket! I know that's got it somewhere. I don't care, please. Just show me. Okay, where are we? Canada. Here we go. Carrier ship, destroyer, frigate. No, that's not. I'm gonna murder people. Where are we? Battleship. Right. Is this it? It's one of these, I think. Yes, here we go. There were two designs proposed for the Canadians. One of which had all the turrets on the centre line. And one of which had the one of the forward mounts positioned slightly to the left. At least I think that's what it is. But yeah, these were the two designs proposed for Canada.
Oh.
It's literally just a Queen Elizabeth, but with the turrets flat on the deck to save weight. To save weight and cost. You can get 3 of them for the cost of 2 QEs. I will just very quickly, if I am allowed to, I'm going to very quickly show. There we go. So I'm going to very quickly show that. Yep, this is the ship I'm talking about and referring to. There you are. You can pause on that. Would it be worth it to remove a turret to get 1 super firing and get more speed? No, because the objective is N8 gun broadside. And that's what they want. Okay, we'll back up now to go and see where I was. What about the Iowas? The Iowas are not the best balanced battleships in the world. They prioritize speed over protection. They have decent firepower for their size, but they are very weakly protected. They could have been penetrated by the Nagatos and easily by the Yamatos, whereas, yes, in theory they can penetrate the Yamatos, but I am still somewhat questionable about their ability to defeat certain parts of Yamato's armor scheme. Back in a tick. Chair, keep these people entertained.
There. Hello. So CDOT is a modernized U4. Isn't that just a QE? No. Cereal or soup? No. Because you don't make soup out of milk. I don't make much soup, but I don't think you could just milk as its own. I don't think can be considered a soup, because really cereal like cornflakes are just croutons within the soup. So the garden economy is very difficult these days. So poor chairs. Garden chairs can be found sort of spattered everywhere. You know, someone sort of outside of a cheap roadside food establishment or something like that. I'm inclined to agree with Samurai there with soup is just a wet salad rather than cereal, because
oh, for God's sake, no, for God's sake, no, I'm shutting it down. No, I'm
as I've said before, the cornflake is just
I'm shutting,
a crouton.
no, we're done here. We're done here, boys, we're done here. Alright, okay, we're done. Bloody hell. You went into the cereal as soup debate. Never do that on Ramblings, for goodness sake.
Why not? I've conclusively said that it is not.
Yeah, but... overthrow fleet. Yes, over my dead body.
That's generally how hostile takeovers work, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm not dead, so...
Pigs and blankets are not sushi! Stop it!
The Marshall Rune asks, if the Pacific War happened somehow in the absence of a war in Europe, and somehow ended before things got way out of hand, and somehow nothing happened in Europe despite the US and several military powers being locked into conflict with Japan, how willing would the US be to take chunks of the Japanese island and its colonial possessions and declare it their own? No! No! The whole point of the war is to defeat imperialism and enshrine self-determination.
Like, they might keep Okinawa, or like the airbase on Okinawa, but you're not... Like, a couple of bases, but not...
Like, the biggest... Like, Australia might get the Japanese holdings in the South Pacific.
Maybe.
I mean, heck, if if Germany is still some form of republic and not under the Nazis, Germany might get their colonies in the region back. Germany might get their Pacific Island holdings back from Japan. Not if they're fascist, but if they're not, they might. Arms Korean nukes. Yeah, fuck off. Yeah. You haven't got the delivery systems yet, and also your missiles can't reach me. I'm not scared. Designs which are truly horrible. Not bad like the Bismarck, really horrible designs. Those are very rare in warship construction. Very rare.
Well, HMS Captain.
Yeah, there's Captain. Captain's the only real example that you could point to that springs to mind, to my knowledge.
And Hush. But
I'm going to come back here! Don't run away from me, you fucking bastard!
Ah!
What the fuck? Laser-guided shark?
Laser-guided shark? Why would you need to laser-guide a shark?
To get the ducks, obviously.
But that seems far too complicated of a system. When you can't you just have a semi-active homing shark rather than a
no. Forced to. I will fucking don't. You know not to bully Hosh in my presence. I don't like it. Malaklos shark. Ah. Malaklos shark.
Yes! Air superiority, Nimrod!
Fucking...
Air superiority, Nimrod!
Why we thought that was a good idea, I'll never know.
Air superiority, Nimrod!
Calm down, for goodness sake. You'll lose your marbles if you go on much further.
I'm here with you. Do you think I had any?
I've seen a kung fu movie with what? You know what? That doesn't surprise. Darth Sidious, that's priceless. Hello, it is me, Helium. I'm a noble. Bang. That's one way to end the reign of terror. Oh, fucking hell. I've had it with you and your anti-submarine shenanigans. Have at thee! Oh, God. Priceless. Oh.
Firing a sidewinder to intercept a Strela fired from the bridge of a Typhoon.
Yes, I know, C-Dodders. That was from the time when you indulged Dr. Clark's madness. How many engineers did the Kriegsmarine turn over to the Gestapo? None. Because they were basically working on mad things that would make Hitler clap for joy, so that they didn't get sent to the Eastern Front. Things like a cruiser that carries a fuck ton of bombers across the Atlantic and then inflates an inflatable runway to launch them. That compared to the B-2 Spirit just looks like an F-117 on steroids. That's probably because that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean... So we have one successful design. Why haven't we just made it into a strategic bomber?
Typical way to reduce displacement during the time of the Washington Naval Treaty.
Take stuff off.
What do you mean?
Make hulls smaller.
Yeah. What do you mean? Can you clarify? Do you mean...
Make it out of cardboard.
Yeah, like, what do you mean? Do you mean
Cold
in terms
Japanese,
of...
lie. It's... Your ship can weigh anything if you use Tipex.
This is the thing. Typical ways to reduce displacement. That's a massive... that's a massive, huge area. Like, do you mean in terms of reduce displacement in a design, or reduce the amount of displacement needed for certain objects? Like, or
Just build some destroyers instead. You don't need a battleship. What are you talking about?
Because just saying reduce displacement.
Please
That's
ignore my 45,000-ton destroyer. It's nothing.
cut the bow off. Well, the front fell off. I swear, the front's not meant to do that.
We towed it out of the environment.
Yeah, it was hard. Well, why did it take so long? It was hard. The front fell off.
Don't have a superstructure. You don't need guns.
Clearly, those are just
Still armor? That's nonsense.
Clearly, those are just 3 destroyers in a trench coat. Oh, you know,
I mean,
there are times when we have comedic effects on this show, and this is one of those times. Do I try and be cheeky?
I mean, it's just 3 destroyers with a bunch of wooden cardboard bolted to them. They pretend that they're a catamaran battleship, just 2 destroyers.
No, we don't talk
2
about
cruisers welded together. Oh no, we haven't built a battleship. These are just 2 cruisers that are very close to each other.
Well, Bull Reeves, that's because
At
the North
the same
Carolinas. Well, Bull Reeves, that's because the North Carolinas were rather aggressively altered. They were as aggressively altered as the design would allow once the escalator clause became clear it was going to be kicked in. You know, with the 16-inch guns and more armor. Slightly more armor. A little bit. What worked better for a TDS? Oil for the USN or water for the RN? I have no idea! Because I am not Drac. I am Discount Drakkenfell. Take your pick. Whichever one of the menagerie of bloody titles I have now. I've got like 20 of the bloody titles now. I've been everything from Wilkinson's Drac to Poundland Drac to Drac of the Thrift Store. No, not Drac Jr. That is the one I don't want. That's the one that's banned. Because it's...
Meal Deal Drac.
That's fine. Because Drac Jr. is rather creepy connotations. And I don't want to consider those. Drac V2 implies I'm an improved version, which I am very much not.
Right. Drac V 0.5, I think, is what you're really looking for.
Drac Beta? Prototype Drac? These are all... Drac cloning experiment. No, definitely not. We look nothing alike. I can tell you that for nothing. Mega Bloks Drac.
P. Porsche Drac.
Fucking... Oh, God.
I like that one.
That's hilarious. Soviet lab Drac built to counter the real Drac. Younger Drac? Absolutely fucking not.
He is far older.
No, I'm not. Drac's older than me, but still. Younger Drac again is just Drac. Which again, has creepy connotations.
Didi Drac. Auxiliary Drac. In case of emergency, break glass Drac.
I'm waiting for the day when that happens. When Drac's supposed to do a live stream and he just falls ill or goes to hospital and he breaks glass and says, "Fleet, would you mind?" I'm waiting for that day because I have a suspicion that the more it goes on and the more I collaborate and the bigger my channel gets, the higher the chance of that happening becomes. Hmm. Darth Sidious. Each Navy's best, worst designs during the interwar years. Okay, so best overall. Royal Navy, best design overall in interwar years is the Tribals. They got a fuck ton of use out of them, and they were extremely effective. Worst design, probably the Nelsons. The reason I say that is because no, hear me out.
You still my beating heart.
No, hear me out. This is worst in comparison to, it's basically down to the fact that they should have gone with the 9 15-inch battlecruiser instead. What they got instead was it took them 2 decades to work out the kinks of the Nelsons and get them fighting fit. They weren't bad ships, but they were the worst designs I can think of that the RN actually built during the interwar period. And if the worst is the Nelson, that's not saying much.
That is true.
Germany, best design in the interwar years has to be the Scharnhorsts, for obvious reasons. Good war service, well-rounded ship. Worst design has to be the light cruisers of the E-class. The ones that basically couldn't go out in heavy seas, otherwise they'd just keel over and shake themselves apart.
Rattle, rattle, rattle.
France, their first treaty cruisers because they had no fucking armor at all and could be sneezed on by a bloody destroyer and explode. Best design, the Dunkirks and Strasbourgs, easily, without a shadow of a doubt. Soviet Navy, worst design, Kirovs, because fuck me, why the Russians did that, I have no idea. Best design, that has to go to the completions of the Tsarist cruisers. Even though it took them a long time to complete them, what came out the other side were fairly effective, albeit interesting, light cruisers. Japan, the last generations of their pre-war heavy cruisers were some of their best work, because the Yamatos are not interwar designs. The Yamatos are finished during the Second World War period, and as such they don't fall under this category. Worst has to be the Megamis, too lightly built for what they were. Italy, best interwar designs, has to go to some of their large light cruisers, which were incredibly effective pieces of kit. Worst, some of their small light cruisers, which were just why, just build more destroyers. Who have I not done? Oh, America. America, best interwar design, that has to go to the Brooklands, because all the 6-inch guns. And the worst interwar design has to go to the Sims, because when your destroyer nearly tips over and kills people because you tried to overload it, you fucking imbeciles.
Well done.
Peanut asks, serious question, you're a leader of a random ambiguous nation. You're going to war with another random ambiguous nation. You can go back in time and pull 3 military leaders from 3 separate time periods from history. What 3 military leaders do you choose? I want the Commander-in-Chief from Operation Desert Storm, who led the US coalition.
Schwarzkopf?
Yeah, I want Schwarzkopf to lead to be an overall command of the ground and air campaign. I want whoever was leading the air campaign in Desert Storm to lead the air campaign, and I want Admiral Ernest J. King to lead the Navy. Because if it's the modern era, King can adapt to modern naval combat. The principles of using the ships aren't much different. Dominance, and also King. If I get King towards the end of his life, if King can keep his knowledge from when he was alive, but I bring him back in from World War II, he'll have, monitored the Navy through the early Cold War period. He'll know what the score is, mostly. Marshall Rune asks, taking the conversation elsewhere, how big can you make an airship? For instance, in the interwar years, Germany planned big ones, the biggest 300 meters long, with large hydrogen capacities. Is this the upper limit of technology at the time, or could bigger be built? Depends. You basically want I don't know the exact. I'd have to go and get a fucking material science degree to properly answer that question, or get someone who fucking did have a materials science degree to answer the question. You know, like
Does
Drac.
anyone here have a material science degree?
Like Drac, but again, like I said, not Drac. So I don't know. But ideally, once you get to about 300 meters, you want to start double and triple hulling the ships to get more gas capacity rather than making them longer. Darcy says, can we do the question again, but pre-World War One? Alright, here we go again. No, actually, we can't, because that's such a wide and varied time period that I can't do it. Narrow it down, and then we'll talk.
The giant, the Japanese ships that just tread the...
I hate that design. I hate that design. It's just, why...
Like, why have you even bothered putting a traverse on it if you're going to put the superstructure above?
Yeah, and also, more to the point, like, I get, like, you know, you want things to, like, for something like that to be funny, it has to make sense.
And it is funny, I must admit.
No, it's not, to me, because it makes no sense.
But, haha, funny, big gun.
No, that's it. I need a time frame narrowing down. Because pre-World War One runs all the way back to Jesus fucking Christ, even before that bastard came along.
I'd say the worst British design was Ugg's rotted logboat, which fell apart and sank the minute he sat in it.
So, 1910 to 1914. Alright. Oh, if I don't... I'm not an expert on this period. Well, I'm not an expert. It's one of the... It is a period I've studied, but I'm not able to hit the high notes as well as I can with the Second World War. But... Alright, I'll give it a crack. Russia. Best design for Russia, pre-World War One. That has to be Rurik. The Ganguts are nice and all, but I think in terms of a well-rounded design, well-built, it has to be the armoured cruiser Rurik. Because she's just flat out good. In terms of bad designs, take your pick on whatever shitty Russian torpedo boat they were working on prior to the First World War breaking out. Because Russian destroyers were just generally kind of crap. Austro-Hungarian, best ship has to go to the... The Tegetovs are alright, but they do have... Despite being... They're alright, but... And while they are technically better ships than the ship I'm going to name as my best ship, they do still have a range of issues... that while the three that were built properly are not as bad as their half-sister that was built in Hungarian yards, the Tegetovs do still have some issues that plague them during their career. The Radetzky-class semi-dreadnoughts, however, were extremely well built and had virtually no problems throughout their entire service period. In terms of flawed ships, well, you know what the answer is going to be. It's going to be Verbus Unitas, the Hungarian-built member of the Tegetov class. That ship was so deeply flawed, it wasn't even fucking funny. French ships. Worst ship built between 1910 and 1914. Probably the Britannias. Building a super dreadnought capital ship without the elevation that exceeds the range of its secondary guns and without an increase in armour from the ship with 12-inch guns is just a bad idea, France. Why? The best ships built pre-war were arguably some of the fast French cruisers, because they were a move towards belted cruisers with high speed and a uniform battery, built in modern style. Germany, worst ship, arguably I'd go with... Arguably, I'd go with any German cruiser laid down after 1912 with 4-inch guns as the main armament. The Germans could see which way the wind was blowing, they could see the British moving to 6-inch guns, and yet they still chose to stick with the 4-inch when they had 5.9-inch guns available and ready to go, which was a just silly, silly decision. Best ship, that goes to the Deflingers, without a doubt. British, obviously the best ship is the QEs, and the worst is the Indefatigables, because why are you fucking doing that, you daft cunts? America, best ship has to go to whichever one of the standards is there, whichever one of the standards is towards 1914, and the worst ship has to go to whatever funny shit the US was doing with destroyers at the time, because, well, again, US destroyers pre-World War I are an interesting batch of MacGuffins. And now for our final entry, which is the Japanese. The worst ship has to go to their attempt to build a dreadnought totally Viswag. Just ignore the fact that we have a mixed battery, with some guns being 12-inch 50s and some guns being 12-inch 45. You fucking idiots, make them all 12-inch 45s or make them all 12-inch 50s. Don't mix and match, it's a dumb idea. The best ship built pre-World War I for Japan has to go to, obviously, Kongo herself, because she's just about finished when the war breaks out, and is the most powerful battlecruiser in the world at the time of her completion. If Graf Zeppelin was actually constructed and used operationally, how would it perform compared to contemporaries from other nations? I answered this last week. Please go and check it out. And Drac himself chipped in on that answer. So please do go and check that out from last week's, because I'm not repeating myself this week. And I've actually answered that question 2 weeks on the bounce, counting last week. So I'm not doing it a third time. No, not badly it is, but I'm not going to repeat myself any more than that. Every ship for itself, brawl, between one of all the last pre-dreadnoughts of every major navy. Assuming one ship must survive the brawl. Which ship has the best chance to come out on top? It's a three-way throwdown. Because everything else is just too pathetically weak to matter. Between the Radetzky class, the King Edward VII's, and the Danton class of the Marine Nationale. And it's basically going to be a even split between those three ships. Because those three ships are the most capable pre-dreadnoughts ever built. Okay, another question about the Pacific Theatre of World War II not breaking out. One of the theatres of World War II breaks out does not end until 1. The mushrooms dropped, 2. The capital is stormed, or you make things so hopeless one of the parties was likely to start World War II. Is there any chance the war is cut short by people just deciding it's hopeless? No. The war ends with either the mushrooms, capital being stormed, or overwhelming force bringing them to the table. Simple as that. Oh, sorry, King Edward VIII was one of the Lord Nelsons, I think, or was she not? I'm just going to have a look. I might be getting my British Lake pre-dreadnoughts mixed up. Wouldn't surprise me, wouldn't be the first time I've done it. I may be, actually. No, I am getting my I am getting my ships mixed up. Yes, indeed, I absolutely am. Sorry, yes, Lord Nelson, sorry. I don't know about specific cruisers from before the First World War. It's not my area of expertise. And pre-World War One cruisers are very much a wash because they're all narrowing towards very similar use goals and use cases. You're looking at navies reaching very similar solutions to similar problems, and you're pretty much looking at a wash. Worst cruisers, there aren't really any properly bad designs of cruisers in the pre-World War I period. It's usually whatever cruiser is the oldest at the time within the fleet that is the worst. So it's not really a fair comparison. And again, stacking them all up, as I said again, it's much of a muchness. You're looking at roughly equivalent ships. There are some exceptions here. The Austrian cruisers are very much weaker than the rest, but that's because the Austrians are having to build small scout cruisers rather than designs for fleet work, as they're using a lot of their budget to build coastal and littoral craft for work in the Adriatic, and also to build the latest and greatest battleships to attempt to keep up with the Italians. Nice having all of you here who are leaving. As always, it's a pleasure to have you all. Best and worst cruisers of the interwar period. Again, well, the thing is with this, we know how it all went down because there were a lot more cruiser-on-cruiser fights in the Second World War. And the problem with these sort of questions is that you're trying to apply best and worst logic to a massive range of ships which were mostly built for the same specifications, and the only things between them are when they were built. So of course the Toneis are going to be better cruisers, aside from their battery layout, than the other Japanese cruisers that came before them, because they were post-treaty cruisers of the interwar period. Of course the Italian cruisers are going to be better than the British ones because they cheated occasionally. But again, you're better off not looking at the raw stats and what's better and worse. You're better off instead looking at the active careers of the ships, how they're meant to be used, and otherwise, rather than trying to apply best and worst tags to them, because all applying best and worst tags to ships does is apply false positives and negatives to them, and thoroughly simplify down. Most efficient, now that is an interesting question. In terms of efficiency, you're looking at a very close tie between the counties, the last counties, and Algerie. Algerie is arguably one of the most efficient treaty cruisers built, because she's protected against her own guns, armed with 8 8-inch guns, and she's pretty quick. Rono asks, in my opinion, what is the first pre-dreadnought, the Royal Sovereigns or the Majestics? I think both. Both or either. Both or either can have the title. It really doesn't make muchness. But me personally, I always lean towards the Royal Sovereigns. For every major nation, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, because that's even worse. Trying to compare interwar locomotives is impossible, because each railway system has different requirements, different loading gauges, different wagons that the locos are being asked to pull, different load requirements, different axle loading requirements. You can't do comparisons that way across borders, it doesn't work. Marshall Rune asks, what ship from 1910 to 1945 would be the hardest to convince to surrender had it been transported through time to 2023? For instance, not a navy, but some SSUs would be remarkably difficult to convince to lay down their arms had they been dropped in modern-day Berlin or something. They'll be heavily indoctrinated and see the whole thing as... No. If you're dropping someone so clearly through time that it's fairly obvious to them that they have been dropped through time, well, the SS is hard to say whether they'd surrender or not. I'd like to think that they would, and at least be arrested. Um, Transiting a warship through time and convincing it to surrender is fairly easy, because warships don't engage things they don't recognize. So they'll come up to investigate what it is. Best 1920 to 39 interwar UK locomotive? The Stania Black 5. Why, are you surprised? Peanut asks, how was the first pre-dreadnoughts of each nation stacking up against each other? USSR, so Iowa, the Majestics, the 9.4-inch ships of the Germans, the 9.4-inch ships of the Austrians, the 12-inch ships of the Italians, the 12-inch ships of the Russians. It's so much of a muchness. They have varying armor thickness, and they all have 4 12-inch guns. They all have a mix of secondary batteries of various different menageries. It's basically whoever lands the big 12-inch hit first is going to win that fight. Doesn't matter which ship it is. Nycastic Kia asks, how innovative was the manufacturing techniques in Germany that used on their warships to bypass the treaty in the interwar period? Not really that inventive. They pioneered the use of marine welding, but it was just slightly ahead of everyone else, not by too much. And mostly they just lied. They just lied. Best BR steam locomotive? Stania Standard 5 MT. General mixed traffic machine. Can do anything you ask it of. Can do anything you ask of it. If locomotives have BRs, what will be tier 10? A modern mixed traffic European electric locomotive, like a Trax, a Deutsche Bundesbahn 101, a Swiss RE4, a Swiss Federal Railways RE460, a BLS RE460, a French what's the modern French locomotive? Fuck, I don't. Anyway, just a Bobo electric. UK class 68 would also count because that's again European Bobo electric. Same thing. Best BR modernization plan diesel, the class 37. Rugged, reliable, capable of handling most any work you give it, including express work at a pinch. Yeah, the 47s are good, but while they are mixed traffic, the 37s have a reputation for being slightly more rugged. Yeah, the 68s and 69s, basically being the diesel and electric version of the same locomotive, are up there. They certainly look nice. What warship with their historical crew and commander would be least likely to surrender to someone if travelling forward through time to the modern day? Again, as I said, the moment it becomes clear they're not in their own time, the first thing that a crew of a warship is going to do is find out what time they're in and what the hell's going on in the world. This includes Japanese and Nazi warships. It is unlikely that the crew will keep fighting if the war is over. Even Japanese ships would just not continue the fight. Would any of the proposed Tillman designs for battleships actually be feasible to build? Yes, 2 of them. Basically any of the Tillman designs that don't have the stupid sextuple gun turrets, and don't use guns larger than 18 inches, can be built in US yards. It'll be expensive, and it'll basically eat up a lot of the US's budget. You'll get 2 ships instead of the class of 5 they wanted to build. Yeah, Tillman 4-2 is feasible. They could work up an 18-inch gun relatively quickly. And the turret technology exists to build the triple 18s. She can be built in US yards. They've built ships as large as her in the form of large liners prior to the war. It wouldn't win against a duel against 2 Yamatos. Like I said, feasible to construct does not mean a good idea to construct. This is the thing. As I've lost my co-host, I'm going to make this a nice, short, sharp ramblings today, folks. So we're going to have another 13 minutes of questions, and I'm going to wrap up. So, if you have any short, sharp questions you want answering now, please do lay them on me. It obviously will not... Why will it obviously not work? There's nothing wrong with the Tillman designs. You co-hosted. I'm fairly certain you did. Big ship plus big target? Yes, but that doesn't mean anything. Just because it's a larger ship doesn't mean much of anything. It also means she's going to be tough and well armored, as the Tillmans were going to be. Just because you can... Also, it's a warship. They're all big targets. Favourite non-standard UK locomotive? Some of the early electrics that the Northeastern Railway was building. She's also going to be the first thing targeted due to her size. Not necessarily. While she's going to be one of the... In any fleet engagement, because that's what she'll be involved in. She'll be involved in a fleet engagement. She'll be the target of one enemy capital ship. Because that's the way fleet engagements work. Unless you're fighting multiple ships on one, which is a US ship she wouldn't be. She'd be with her sisters, half-sisters, successors, etc. She'll be engaging a Japanese or British or whatever line of battle. Okay. Thoughts on the... Arna asks, thoughts on the High Speed 2 cancellation? Yeah, I can talk about that. Since that's... Well, it is modern politics. It's not divisive politics in any real way. It's not going to cause people to throw their toys out the pram and start lobbing insults around. So... While it is a shame that they aren't taking it beyond Birmingham, which means that they're not going to relieve all of the West Coast Main Line's traffic issues, I am still glad that they are building it to Birmingham and they are going to relieve the busiest part of the West Coast Main Line's traffic issues and free up more paths for freight on that southern end of the West Coast Main Line. I am relieved that they have switched over to what I always said they should do, which is funnel that money into track upgrades, more loops, triple or quadruple tracking various lines, improve signalling, more paths for various parts of Northern Railway networks. Scoot asks, what preserved railway lines have I visited? I visited the Nene Valley Railway, the Severn Valley Railway, the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, the Great Central Railway, the Festiniog Railway, the Welsh Highland Railway, the Snowdon Mountain Railway, nice to hear. Would any of the heavy siege guns that Imperial Germany used in World War I would still have been effective, or at least not obsolete by the time World War II were on? Yes. A lot of the guns that were still around saw action in the Second World War. Because they were still useful for the same role, and nothing had arrived to replace them yet. Air power and missiles would take their role by the end of the conflict, but that wasn't possible until the end of the conflict. Favourite Dutch train? The British ones that you took from us after the Woodhead closed. Yes, I'm cheating. The EM2s from the Woodhead that became Dutch electric locomotives and served good long lives before being retired. Anyone got any final questions? Alright, Peanut, I promise. Remind me again next week that I need to let you co-host with me and whoever's co-hosting that week. Send me a message next week and I'll make sure that you're on the co-hosting. Just don't fuck up. You have one shot at this. Don't make me regret it. I know you won't let me down. Why is the UK's main naval base, considering most naval action happened off the... Why is the UK's main naval base in Scapa Flow, considering most naval action happened off the south coast? Well, first off, Scapa Flow's not been a naval base since a few years after the end of the Second World War. Secondly, most naval action didn't happen off the south coast. It happened in the North Atlantic or the North Sea during both World Wars. As in most major naval action involving large convoys and submarines and large capital ships. And it's in Portsmouth today because that's concentrated most of our ships in Portsmouth. We're not dealing with European enemies anymore, and it's closer to the capital to be run. Makes logistics easier, makes funding easier. Seven minutes remaining. Please ask your last questions now. Is there anything you'd like me to... Will there be a post-Ramblings game? You know, I wasn't going to. I was probably going to play something by myself. But if people really want it... we'll have a post-Ramblings game of some kind. If people really want it. You'll have to give me 10 minutes to recharge my social batteries. And, like, get some funny videos in. To let me recharge my social batteries. But then I'll be back in Event Room 1. How much of the steel used to import British warships was imported from elsewhere in the Empire? Virtually none. Virtually none. Indeed, Sheffield's... That's... Yes, Sulphur, that's true. But that's not the Empire, is it? And that was only a brief spell in the build-up to the Second World War. I would have thought you needed to import to build on that scale for the Navy. Why? We were the second largest steel producer in the world after the United States. Until we threw it all away. Well, actually, until the US upscaled for the Second World War. What's my favourite Indian train? I don't really have one. Did German ship construction suffer from the lack of imported trace metals in World War One, World War Two? I believe so, from what knowledge I've got, but don't quote me on that. That might be worth a Google search after Ramblings is over. But I think so. Steel quality comparison between navies, i.e. Pittsburgh steel compared to Sheffield steel. I'm not going to get into that nationalist dick-waving contest, because that's all it is. A nationalist dick-waving contest. and I'm not going to get into that. Of course, both me and Sea Dotters know the answer to that question. It's Sheffield Steel, but no, I'm not going to make that an official dry dock position or an official thing that I'm going to say in Fleet's Random Ramblings. Bloody bastard French. I love Sharp. It's great. Alright, tell you what. Those who want there to be a post-Ramblings game of some sort, just gather in the event text-to-speech. You gather in event room 1. Talk amongst yourselves for what you want to do. And when I come back, I will then decide if I actually want to take that on board. No guarantees. Because obviously, again, this is my post-Ramblings cooldown before I go to bed, so I need to enjoy it as well. But yeah, please do discuss what you want to do, and then please come back to me. Alright, thanks very much for joining, everybody who who has joined and who has enjoyed actually being here for Ramblings. There we go, my brain had a moment there. Thank you very much. Take care, folks, and I will catch you next time. Take care. I already